if you had a clean palette, like an artist, a clean palette, to start with, what would you do differently? Now, I'm sure because some of you are operators and some are consultants and some are vendors, we should have 4 distinctly different viewpoints here, or maybe 3.5 distinctly different viewpoints. And of course, I'll be disruptive and say something ridiculous as well. But the question is, if I had a clean palette to start with, what would I do differently? And that's in terms of operations, network, presumably any part of it you want. Now, it's a good mix of people here. But before we talk about the clean palette, let's talk about how we got here in the first place and why we're here, okay, in this particular stage in time. You might have a different problem or different answer, Wingley, because you did start with a clean palette not so long ago. So you could be a little bit the odd man out here, I think. But maybe I should start with Eunice and fire Eunice and ask, what do you think, how do we get to where we are now in complexity or whatever with our networks and our business models in the telco space? Unless you don't want to answer the question, we'll get somebody else to do it.
How did we get here?
Yeah, how do we get here? Yeah.
A tortuous 30-year path?
Yeah.
40-year
So you've
path?
had the experience at Telecom, you know.
Well, I think if we had the benefit of hindsight, or if we had a crystal ball, 10, 20 years ago, and we look to the future, the planners at that time probably wouldn't have envisioned anything very different. The vendors dictate a lot of how carriers develop. Handset manufacturers, people like Apple, have been hugely disruptive in determining how operators roll out their networks. I mean, if it was up to us, we wouldn't be doing LTE. We were quite happy with 2G and 3G without that capex and the backhaul that we needed to invest in. But these damn mobile smartphones, this increasing data and forcing us to invest in capex. So I don't think things would be very much different, to be honest.
Yeah, I do like that answer because I honestly don't know why I want LTE. I don't want it. I can't get it where I live. I've just got 3G where I am, and that's considered to be miraculous. But I don't actually want more. How much speed do I really want? So I think that's a very valid point. Are we being driven by market forces that we don't control, or are the technologists leading us? I'll leave you to last on this one. What do you, Wingley? He wants to answer. Look, he's jumping straight in on that one. That was a mistake.
What's it, Dennis? Who's Ericsson?
Yeah. So I think it's very true that the whole industry is keep on developing, and because I think it's the ecosystem, right? So it's the ecosystem that drives us, the operators, the vendors, the partners, even the chipset. It's the ecosystem that drives us moving forward, and as our VP Paul just has just highlighted, so we see the biggest trend that driving the industry or the ecosystem is the customer demand. The people that want this change is us. It's every one of us, because we want more, we want higher speed, we want faster response. So it's the end user's demand that change. It's the individual of us that wants. So I plan to move to my new house. But I'm thinking when I just want to plan to buy, whether it's a Samsung LED TV, or I just think of, so how is it connected? I found that there's so many gaps, so many things that we can't do with our current TV. So that gap, that end user demand, the gap, drive the industry. Right. Because of the end user demands.
I disagree completely. Yeah. Because I'm going to throw myself into this one. If I hadn't have heard of 4G, I wouldn't have even thought about it. Somebody told me about 4G. I started writing about it. Last week I wrote a story about 5G, and I'm almost embarrassed that I wrote the story now. Who cares about 5G? I can't even cope with 4G. I can't count much more than 4 or 5. So if we get to 6G, I'm finished, or I'll be dead, one or the other. I can't believe it. So I don't know. I think you've opened up a Pandora's box, which is good. I'll give you the money afterwards for that one. Cheryl, you want to jump into this one before? If I hand it over to Wing Lee, we're really in trouble now. What's this?
Yeah, I think consumer demand, yes, but the operators and the vendors have also dangled the carrot. Like, this is LTE. Do you want it? I didn't want LTE when I did not have it. Now I have it. I can't do without it. That's a simple fact. we keep piling on. We want to grow our market. We want to grow our revenue. Yeah, get more, take more, take more, take more, and that's where we are, I think. Yeah.
Did your operator make it that attractive for you to move to LTE? You've had 2 handsets.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen one LTE
Tell
handset
me about M1 came, iPhone 5. Do you want it? Do you want it? Yeah. Give up your 12 gigabyte cap for 2 gigabytes. This is it.
You have no control as a consumer. You just got sucked right into that, didn't you?
Absolutely.
And even as a consultant, do you believe that that's what people want or demand? Or is it, like you said earlier, it's being led by the vendors and the operators themselves?
I tend to think that consumers don't know what they want until they see it.
Until they see
and
it.
they use it, and suddenly they want it. And suddenly iPhone is everywhere in Singapore. Everywhere.
Yeah, in Hong Kong, it's as soon as your friend gets it, you have to have it.
Yes, absolutely.
Probably much the same here as well, I suspect. Okay, Wing Lee, come on.
Okay. So I think it's unfortunate, right, if we were to let other people drive what we do. I think at the end of the day, we have obligation to create value, and you create value by challenging status quo. So if you were to just follow other people's presentations or whatever pitch, then you are just basically a piggy bank for other people, and that's no fun to be a industry participant and just go with the flow. I think in life, there are always 2 choices. Do you go with the flow, or do you drive new flow? I think the latter is more interesting. So with that said, I think it's important to recognize that consumer is a very important part of the ecosystem, but at the same time, the consumer don't necessarily know what is good and what way the world should evolve. Henry Ford said one time, he said if he were to ask his customer what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. So I don't think we're in the business of supplying faster horses. So I think fundamentally speaking, if we were to understand the insights of how the world is evolving and making sure that we invest wisely to capture the global trend, then we have an opportunity to create new value. So as an example, if you were to look at the world, people recognize the fact that internet is going to be the most fundamental innovation momentum, right? So if that's the case, then data, by definition, becomes a very important part of lives. Whereas by the existing vendor ecosystem are still geared towards a circuit switch ecosystem or a bolt-on of a data component to a circuit switch-based network, which was the case in the last 10 plus 20 years, then I think there's an opportunity that you have a clean slate, which fortunately I do have a clean slate, is that you don't worry about all the circuit switch liability. You invest into a flat IP network from day one, which is exactly what we've done about 3.5 years ago. So luckily that bet had played off. Now then again, providing a pipe is not interesting. The question then is that beyond technology, we have to understand what role we play in the ecosystem, what role do we play in the value chain, because at the end of the day, if a company were to create shareholder value at some point, then you must make sure that you're well positioned to capture value. Because if you cannot capture value, there's no valuation, correct? Value partners.
Yep.
So from my perspective, is that once we figure out the technology direction, it's just the world's going all IP, and then more and more IP-based devices that you can tap into beyond human beings, because if you count based on human beings, you're limited based on the population size. But if you count based on addressable IP-based devices, then you have a much larger population size, right? So you understand that, so you invest based on a flat IP network that allows for any devices to be connected, whether it's operated by a human being or not. Good, so we get that sorted out.
true, yep.
Then the second part is that how do you ensure that you figure out what your role is relative to the value chain. Now, the operator is always in between something. So by definition, we are an intermediary. The question then is that how do you create value as an intermediary, right? So those are the strategic topics that we have to think about as we drive our investment, right? So one thing that we find out that if you look at the global trend of the internet is based on identity, right? In the internet, every single somebody in the internet would say that, hey, please get an ID from me. Please create an ID. Give me your account, identify who you are, then I can give you the best service, the best experience you'll ever have on my website. So the ID-based architecture, as we call it, identity-based architecture, is a fundamental mega trend of the internet. So if we have an opportunity to start from a clean slate, which we had, then we say, forget about SIM cards. Who cares about SIM cards?
Yep.
With all due respect. Especially ladies, when's the last time you break your fingernail changing SIM cards? Oftentimes, right? So we don't want that. We
Forget
don't
that,
want
I broke mine yesterday.
exactly. So even guys, right, we are victimized by those things. So the thing is that if you look at the internet today, all the major internet players are moving towards an identity-based architecture, and the architecture that allows for customer intimacy based on knowing who you are. So if we were to build a network from ground up, wouldn't you want to do that? Wouldn't you want to know, exactly to Paul's presentation earlier, that I ought to have fairly intimate understanding of who my customer is, what they do, how they do it, where they do it, and then I try to create value as an intermediary, so that he will have a better experience on my network versus on other people's network.
I'm going to come back to that. The identity one is a very important point.
Yes.
Farad's shaking violently here. I thought you wanted to jump in on that one.
But my conclusion is that I've done all that. Thank you very much.
You've done all that. You have, I know. But I'm sure you might do some things differently, and I'll come back to you in a moment on that. Farad, what do you think about that? Do you think identity is critical? And if you had a clean slate now, what would you do differently if you were setting up a new operation from scratch? Would you follow the model that YTL?
What do you mean by identity?
Well, we'll come back to identity in a moment. Okay, I want to come back to that later because that's a hot subject at the moment, and Wingley was right to bring it up. But I want to touch on it a bit later.
Setting up a new...
Yes, it's operation.
Well, I think the experience that you guys had was a bit unique in that you were working with WiMAX and all IP, so you didn't have to worry about the circuit voice, etc., etc. But most of us who are GSM cellular operators, well, now I'm in an MVNO. See, I find it hard to say that. We had 8 staff, now we have 40. Huge growth, huge growth. So it is a bit like starting from scratch, except I don't have to worry about the network.
But do you worry about the network?
Oh, every day.
Do you think they should do something different?
Yeah, it's terrible. Telecom, talk to SATA, talk to Hidden Networks. What's going on?
It's revenge of an ex-employee. Yeah.
They still pay my salary, by the way, so I have to watch what I say.
It's all right, we're not recording. Oh, we are recording. Yes, we have got it down. Well done.
Uh-oh. I was going to slam the MCMC next. I'll have to pull it right. But I think what I'd do differently is, what's good for consumers is diversity. And we are limited, very much limited as telcos due to our infrastructure and how we roll it out. In an ideal world, I think you would have one super fast network, 4G, 5G, unlimited fiber bandwidth, and everyone's an MVNO.
Yeah, I agree.
And everyone could just be an MVNO. Don't worry about the capex. And then the vendors would make less.
Yep.
Sorry. I think I'd do that. The second thing I'd do is I'd put everyone on 6-month contracts.
6-month contract?
Yeah.
Why 6 months?
Well, okay, I exaggerate. 1 year is fine. Because when we talk about a lot of the challenges that telcos face and how these lumbering dinosaurs are not adapting to the new world, blah, 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 it's not our fault. It's very hard to steer a supertanker, you know.
Yes.
It takes me, 5-10 years to do a 180. And it's very hard to get in the new skills, to hire these people. That's why Telecom uses consultants like this, because we couldn't afford to hire her full-time, right? And we can't get 20, 30 new people who understand IP and VoIP and OTT. So we can't fire either. You can't just do a mass redundancy of everyone who's involved in the circuit switch side of networks. You just can't do it. They're all unionized these days. So that challenge is getting the new skill sets in the resource. The human resource is something that is so crucial, and yet we don't really address it very well, especially in Malaysia, I think.